Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, I'll share 3 true tales of neighbors, but not the kind you'd borrow sugar from. 1. A man noticed flickering lights next door, only to learn no one had lived there in years. 2. A friendly woman always waved up until police found her apartment had been empty for a decade. 3. A neighbor's nightly hammering led to a hidden basement. And something chained below. Are your neighbors really who they say they are? Want a creepier version or a longer one? Not everything is as it seems. In the quiet rhythm of daily life, we often take comfort in this familiar. The neighbors we greet with a nod, the houses we pass every day, the sounds we chalk up to plumbing or an old house settling. Of these things form the background noise of our lives. We trust that the world around us, especially the immediate world, our neighborhood, is safe and predictable. But sometimes, the scariest truths hide behind the calmest fatal. Section 8. There's something uniquely unsettling about a threat that lives next door. When we imagine danger, we often picture strangers in distant places. We think of abandoned asylums or desolate woods, not the modest house on our block with the neatly trimmed hedges and the mailbox that gets checked every morning. But evil doesn't always announce itself with screams or sirens. Sometimes, it whispers. Sometimes, it waves at you from across the driveway. Take, for example, the case of a man living in a quiet suburb, who began to notice lights flickering in the house next door at odd hours. At first, he thought nothing of it. Electrical problems, maybe. But then he remembered something strange. He hadn't seen the neighbors in weeks. No cars coming or going, no trash bins rolled out to the curb. When he mentioned it to a local mail carrier, he learned that mail hadn't been delivered there in months. The house was supposed to be empty. That realization sparked a kind of quiet horror. What was turning on those lights? It's easy to dismiss these moments as imagination or coincidence, but some people trust their instincts enough to look a little deeper. One woman, curious about the flickering lights, decided to call the police. When they entered the supposedly abandoned home, they discovered clear signs that someone had been living there. Someone who didn't want to be found. Food wrappers, recently used bedding, the back door broken from the inside. Whoever had been there was now gone, but not before invading the quiet comfort of the neighborhood's illusion of safety. Another story centers on a woman who became known in her building as the friendly neighbor. Always cheerful, always smiling, always standing in her window to wave to people as they passed by. Residents found her presence oddly comforting. She reminded them of an older time, when neighbors looked out for each other. But something didn't sit right with the tenant on the floor below. He realized he hadn't seen her leave her apartment in months. Packages piled up outside her door. Eventually, the smell of rot became undeniable. When police forced the door open, they found her body long decomposed, untouched for weeks, and the window where people swore they'd seen her waving, clean, clear, empty. A chill went through the building as people realized they hadn't been waving back at anyone. Sometimes the truth hides not in who people pretend to be, but in what they hide beneath the surface. Sometimes literally. One man was known for being a bit of a loner. He kept to himself, worked odd hours, and often made noise late at night. His neighbors assumed he was working on home improvements or maybe just had a hobby like woodworking. The banging, drilling, and dragging sounds became background noise, until one day, it stopped completely. Days went by in silence. Curious, a neighbor knocked. No answer. The next night, the banging started again, but this time, it was different. Quieter. Almost like something was trying to get out. Eventually, a complaint was made. When authorities arrived, they were met with hostility. The man didn't want them to come in, but with enough pressure, they secured a warrant. In the basement, behind a wall that didn't match the rest, they discovered a hidden room. What was inside is something only a few people know for sure, but the official report mentions restraints, claw marks, and something that might not have been entirely human. The man was arrested, but he refused to speak. The neighborhood has never felt the same since. These aren't tales from movies or novels. These are real accounts, documented, investigated, and they all share something in common. People living among us, passing as normal, hiding terrifying truths. It challenges our sense of reality. It forces us to question what we really know about the people around us. We all play roles in our daily lives. We smile. We say hello. We exchange pleasantries. It's easy to assume those roles are genuine, but behind the smile can be secrets darker than we dare imagine. A neighbor who seems lonely may actually be watching you through binoculars. The house that's always dark may not be empty at all. The friendly guy who always offers to help carry groceries may be building something in his garage that no one should ever see. There's a strange kind of fear that comes with this realization. It's not the scream in the dark, monster in the closet kind of fear. It's subtler, deeper. It's the fear that maybe we've all been a little too trusting, that we've looked into someone's eyes, said good morning, and completely missed the storm raging behind their calm expression. The truth is, we live closer to horror than we want to admit. The most terrifying things don't always lurk in forests or haunted houses. They walk beside us on the sidewalk. They shop at the same grocery store. They wave from across the lawn. And that is what makes these neighbor horror stories so deeply chilling. They're not just stories. They're possibilities. They're reminders that appearances are fragile, that peace can be disrupted in an instant, that the line between normal and nightmare is thinner than we think. The lights in that window, the sound in the basement, the wave from across the street, all of it feels normal until suddenly, it isn't. Until one piece doesn't quite fit, until your instincts whisper that something is wrong, and you begin to listen. Sometimes, the most terrifying evil isn't the stranger in the woods. It's the person who lives 20 feet from your front door. The one whose name you know, but whose truth you've never seen. The one who smiles, but never blinks. The one who you thought was just a little odd until one night, you hear a knock at your door. The unseen can be right next door. It's a phrase that sounds like a warning, and in many cases, it is. We go about our days surrounded by people passing them in the hallway, hearing their footsteps through shared walls, seeing their porch lights flick on at night. Most of the time, we don't give those neighbors much thought. A polite wave, a nod, a shared glance in the elevator. But just because something looks normal doesn't mean it is. Sometimes the strangest, darkest things are hiding in plain sight, just one wall away. There's something profoundly unsettling about the idea that you could live beside someone for years and never truly know who they are. We like to believe that familiarity means safety, that proximity breeds understanding, but history and experience tell us otherwise. Many of the most chilling true stories start not in abandoned buildings or isolated cabins, but in quiet neighborhoods and apartment complexes, because horror doesn't always knock. Sometimes, it already lives next door. One case involved a tenant who began to notice odd things in her building, as strange smells in the hallway, an unusual number of flies gathering near a particular door, and a soft humming sound late at night. She assumed at first it was an electrical issue, maybe a pest problem. Weeks went by, and the smell grew worse. When she finally called maintenance, they broke down the door of the neighboring unit and discovered the tenant had dead for nearly a month. No one had checked on him. No one had noticed. The building had gone on as usual, all while death lingered a few feet away. Sometimes the horrors are more active. In one suburban neighborhood, people began to notice something strange about a particular house. The man who lived there kept to himself, rarely left, and boarded up his windows from the inside. Dogs barked constantly in his backyard, and there were rumors that he only left the house at night. Still, no one intervened. People chalked it up to eccentricity. It wasn't until a delivery driver smelled something foul while dropping off a package that anyone called the police. What they found inside was a maze of filth, cages, and evidence of illegal activities that had been happening for years, all within a house that looked perfectly average from the street. What's most disturbing is how easy it is to overlook these things. Our minds are trained to smooth over the uncomfortable, to assume the best, to avoid confrontation. We see a neighbor acting strangely and tell ourselves they're just private. We hear something odd, a thud, a scream, a dragging noisy, and convince ourselves we imagined it. But sometimes those sounds are not the house settling. Sometimes they're signs, clues, echoes of something no one wants to believe could be real. There was a story about a couple who moved into a duplex and were initially charmed by their quiet neighbor. He seemed shy but friendly, always nodded politely, never caused trouble. But soon they began to hear unusual sounds at night: a metallic clinking, low murmurs, even what sounded like weeping. The walls were too thin to ignore it. Eventually, curiosity turned to concern, and they called the authorities. When the police investigated, they found a hidden door in the neighbor's living room that led to a soundproof room underground. Inside was a person who had been reported missing months before. The neighbor was arrested, but the couple never forgot the way he had smiled at them just days before, as if nothing was wrong at all. The proximity of evil makes it more terrifying. It strips away the illusion that we can identify threats by appearance or distance. It proves that we can live beside something unspeakable and never know. In big cities, where anonymity is a way of life, people can go years without truly interacting with their neighbors. That anonymity can be both a comfort and a curse. It allows people to live as they please, but it also makes it easier for horrors to go unnoticed. In one apartment complex, residents began to experience flickering power, strange static on their televisions, and an odd, rhythmic banging sound at night. Most assumed it was construction, faulty wiring, or maybe someone practicing music. Then one day, fire alarms went off, and firefighters discovered that an entire wall in one unit had been knocked down to create a massive, unpermitted space filled with bizarre equipment, animal remains, and cryptic writings. The tenant had been conducting rituals, claiming he was trying to reach another dimension. He had lived there for years. Not all horrors are loud. Some are disturbingly quiet. One woman lived next to a family that seemed ordinary. 2 parents, a child, a dog. They had cookouts, mowed their lawn, exchanged Christmas cards. But she began to notice the child never made a sound. No laughter, no crying, no footsteps. One day she saw the parents loading a suitcase into their trunk. Nothing unusual, until she realized they hadn't taken the child. Concerned, she eventually alerted authorities. The investigation revealed the child had been kept in a locked room for most of their life, hidden from the world. The family had built a false life around them, fooling the entire neighborhood. The closeness of these stories makes them feel personal, even if they didn't happen to us. They make us question our own lives, our own buildings, our own streets. Who are the people we live beside? What might we be missing? That quiet man across the hall, why does he only take the trash out after midnight? That house on the corner, why does no one ever seem to go in or out? These questions linger, and once they're in your mind, they don't leave easily. Sometimes the behaviors are subtle: covered windows, locked gates, lights that never turn off, noises that don't make sense. But sometimes, it's just a feeling, a gut instinct that something isn't right. Many people ignore those instincts, afraid of being wrong, of seeming nosy or paranoid. But those instincts exist for a reason. They're the mind's way of warning us, of sensing patterns and dangers that logic hasn't caught up with yet. The unsettling truth is that we can never be entirely sure what's happening behind the walls next to us. We assume a certain level of normalcy because it's comfortable. But behind those curtains, behind that smile, behind that locked door, there could be something dark, something hidden, something no one was ever supposed to see.